So here's one, again from Carrie. Thank you, Carrie, by the way, for sending these in. These are all great questions. Sometimes I have people who don't get any recollection of what most of the emotions that are brought up to be cleared. I can let myself start thinking I'm doing something wrong, but really, if you were 60 and trying to remember something that, for example, was frustrating or had you peeved when you were 23, it can be hard to pinpoint. Can you comment? Well, yeah, that's a great question. Great comment. And it's really true. I mean, if you think about it, the subconscious mind remembers everything that we've been through. And how much do we remember consciously? Well, we don't. There are certain rare people who do remember everything consciously, but that's a really rare situation, is really an anomaly. So yeah, my advice is if you're working on somebody and some trapped emotion comes up and they have no idea what it was, if the subconscious says you don't need to know any more about it, just go ahead and release it. And what I tell people is, listen, you know, about 70% of the time when an emotion comes up and you don't know what it is and you have no idea, about 70% of the time it'll come back to you in a day or so. And if it doesn't come back, you don't need to worry about it. Just let it go. And the subconscious can certainly bring it back to somebody's conscious remembrance if it wants to and if it feels like it needs to. But otherwise, if it doesn't feel like it needs to, it'll just let it go and you don't need to worry about it. And you know, the funny thing is sometimes you'll find a trapped emotion that a person won't remember, and then they'll remember it suddenly right then. And in fact, sometimes it's really intense. I remember once I was working with a lady, to give you a great example of how this happens, when I was doing my remote practice for the first couple of years after I wrote the Emotion Code book, I was working with a lady who told me that, well, I found a trapped emotion on her, and I think it was grief, and it happened when she was, I think, 28, around that age. And she thought about it, and she said, no, it doesn't make any sense. I think everything was fine then. And I said, well, let me check it again. So I double-checked it, and I said, no, definitely the emotion is grief. And she said, well, I think everything was fine, and it just doesn't make any sense to me. And I said, well, okay, you know, I'm happy to check it again, and I did. And I said, no, that's what it is. It's grief, and it's that age. And then she said, well, it just doesn't make any sense to me. I can't remember anything about that. And then she breaks down crying, and she told me, this is just amazing, really tragic events that time of her life, that year. She was married to a guy who ended up having an affair, and she had an affair to get even with him, and her life just tumbled to pieces that age. Now, isn't it funny that, I mean, you'd think that she would easily remember that, but because it was so intense and so major, but you know, in that case, she couldn't remember anything about that age until finally suddenly it broke through. And sometimes that won't happen for a day or so. And if it does, great. And if it doesn't, great. You don't even need to worry about it. You just do whatever shows up.